this week, the Meat You Eat Week. And we'll be doing everything from visiting a really fine butcher shop in New York City where you'll learn all you ever wanted to know about the different cuts of meat, to visiting some of our favorite chefs. We'll learn how to make the perfect hamburger, the perfect steak, and we'll even learn how to do a lot of different kinds of grilling. I'll show you some of my favorite recipes, which I think you'll enjoy having in your repertoire. To find out more about today's segments and other related topics, or information about future segments, contact my new website at marthastewart.com. When you think steak, you usually think sirloin. But here at Lobel's Prime Meat Market on Madison Avenue, you'll see from Stanley Lobel himself that there are many, many other kinds of steaks to choose from. Hi, Stanley.
Hi, Martha.
I'm so glad that you're here to show us all about your very famous steaks.
Thank you.
I have never bought a steak this large.
This is an incredible piece of meat.
And it is incredible.
This is called a pin bone sirloin because of the round bone in this particular area. It's about 2.5 to 3 inches thick, and a steak like this will probably serve about, in my house, 3, somebody else's house, 6. And it's unbelievable on the barbecue. You either barbecue something like this, or you broil it or bake it.
Well, that is beautiful. What about this one? Because this is...
And this is another sirloin steak. Now, this is a hip bone sirloin. This particular piece of meat is the most flavorful and best tasting steak on the entire hip, which is all sirloin steaks. Why? Because it's got a very, very big bone and not too much meat, but whatever meat's around the bone is unbelievably delicious.
Whenever I eat steak like this, I always go for that like little piece right next to the bone. Is that the right thing to do?
Sure, you know what you're doing. That's the filet mignon, of course. And all of these steaks are six to 8 week aged, and this is what we take off. This is the aging. Of course, it's not so pretty looking.
Look at the color of that. So that is 6 weeks of aging.
And when you remove that, you're left with this. You never see that, but in order to make the steak great, flavorful, soft, it has to have that age.
So these are our two gorgeous sirloins. Now this kind of sirloin, how long would that take to cook?
That would take at least 35, 40 minutes to bake in the oven. If you're going to broil it, probably around 10 minutes on each side, close to the fire, a little oil on the outside, kosher salt, drop of pepper.
We're going to try to get Stanley to come up and show us how he grills. Sometime, maybe this summer, you'll come up.
Oh, I'd love to.
So what other steaks do you have here? Because there are quite a few different varieties here.
Yeah, here we have, in this particular layer here, we have the shell steak. We have the T-bone steak, or the Delmonico steak. The name of the steak is really based on the size of the fillet. The smaller the fillet changes the name of the steak, basically. So this has a small fillet, and this is called either a Delmonico or a small T-bone. Now this one with a larger fillet, as you can see here, this is called a full porterhouse.
Oh, that's the whole fillet.
That's the full porterhouse. And when you remove the fillet, of course, well, let's go back to this one also. This is the shell steak. We can't leave that one out. This is this.
Okay, this is
portion
this
right
side.
up here.
Okay.
That's right. Okay. You would go out and buy a shell steak, for example. You pay about 10 or 15% more for the shell steak than you would for the porterhouse steak. So the key is to know what you're buying and know how to separate the fillet from the shell area to make two totally different steaks. And it's so simple. It's really taking your knife and going right down the bone, what we call the T-bone, and just removing it.
When you order a fillet in the restaurant, this is what you're getting.
That's exactly what you get, and that's exactly where it comes from. And when you order a strip steak, a New York steak, and a sirloin steak, is all this one piece of meat.
Of these, what's the most popular?
The shell steak. Okay. By far the most popular.
So nice and thick. Is that what people really like? Is that is that the favorite thickness? That's 2 inches?
That's a 2-inch steak. That would be a steak for 2 people.
Yeah.
You broil it and slice it. It would be super.
Fantastic.
And then again, we go back to the porterhouse steak. Remember, on a porterhouse steak, we have a tail. Most often, the tail we find to be much tougher and not as flavorful as the porterhouse or the fillet. So many people, what they'll do, what would be a good idea, if they grind the tail, and this is the tail of the porterhouse.
Oh, I see.
And mold it right back into the shape of a big hamburger, and gently stuff it and mold it right back into the steak, like this. Simply like this. Mold it, mold it, mold it, press and push, so it has a nice look to it. And that becomes part of your porterhouse steak. And the fat that you've trimmed off the top here, which I have some over here, you just trim it down, approximate thickness, of your steak, put it around the meat, and then we take a piece of string
Some string for you.
and simply tie it up.
Is that long enough?
Yep, you know exactly how much to cut.
Well, that's easy.
And you broil it like that.
And so for someone who likes hamburger, they have a hamburger.
That's right.
Or someone who doesn't want to chew
And to
through.
make it a little prettier, we score it a little bit.
That's quite gorgeous. What a good idea that is.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. And what else do we have here? So many.
Here we have some more steaks. I think it might be a good idea to talk a little bit about graining of meat and how the average person can tell a good piece from a not so good piece of meat to a lousy piece of meat, if you excuse the expression.
Right.
There's different graining, and here we have 3 different types, totally different types of graining in meat. The real good graining in a good piece of meat should be web-typed, something like a cobweb feeling on the piece of meat. You see the fine, kneaded grain in the meat?
Right.
That's the perfect steak. In comparison to a steak like this, where the grain is thicker. The thicker the grain, the less apt it's to be a real good, fine piece of steak. Again, here we have another piece of meat, also with a little bit thicker grain. The beautiful one is the one with the fine, needled grain, cobweb type. And this is, again, a shell steak, and this is a rib steak. Rib steak is in a category by itself. When you broil or barbecue a prime rib steak, it's, in my opinion, it's one of the best steaks there are. Very flavorful, because it has a little bit more fat in it, but the fat melts away.
But this is nicely mottled here.
This has a beautiful marble.
Yeah.
Broil a steak like that, and you've really got a meal and a half. And if you notice something, even on a prime fillet, you see the graining in the meat? The graining in the fillet? Very unusual for fillets. Normal fillets in normal restaurants have no grain.
No grain at all.
That's
I know.
why most fillets are just soft and blah. These are flavorful. These are delicious. These you'll really enjoy eating.
So this is sort of a nice small fillet.
This would go into either 2-inch steaks, like that, just the way we have over there, or thinner steaks to pan broil.
Delish.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, good. And now you have something there that I have not seen very often. Those look a little bit strange, wouldn't you say?
A little bit strange and a little bit ugly.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. This is what's called a butcher's tenderloin and or a hanger. Usually they have to be marinated in order to be soft, even if it comes from a real good prime piece of meat. But if you would grind one of these butcher tenderloins, it would absolutely make the best hamburger you've ever eaten in your whole life. That's how delicious it is when you broil one of these hamburgers. I'm a hamburger lover for this. I'm not a steak lover for this.
Okay, so when you come to barbecue, you bring some of these,
We'll
okay?
bring them anyway, sure. Here we have 2 more cuts of meat. This is an eye-round, and in many, many instances it's sold as steak, eye-round steak. The reason I'm bringing this here is because when most people go out and look for a steak in a supermarket, they look for something that looks like this. Real red and no grain. I mean, I've watched people so many times in supermarkets, they pick up a piece of meat and they put it down, they pick up another piece of meat and they put it down, and they take the worst piece of meat that's there. It's just unbelievable. Why? Because it's red and it looks nice. That's not always the clue. The clue is the graining of the meat and the cut of the meat. So don't think that because the meat looks bright red and has no graining that that's the way to go. No. This is a cut of meat that you keep away from for steak.
Okay.
Makes a good roast.
Remember that.
Now here we have the all-famous chuck steak. Chuck steak is a very, very flavorful piece of meat if you get a good prime piece of steak. It has a lot of different uses. You can use it for steak, you can use it for stew, you can use it for roast. The reason I'm showing it is because I want to show you how much fat you actually have in it, and the fact that the chuck is cheaper doesn't always mean that you're paying less. Price per pound has nothing to do with what you're getting. You've got a lot of waste, you've got a lot of things that you can't use for steak.
Any part of this good for just grilling as a steak?
Yes, if you marinate it with a little papaya juice and some oil and garlic for a week and a half, it'll be nice and soft like a shell steak.
So you would prefer if you got this to that?
My favorite is that, no question about it, by far.
Well, thank you, Stanley. This is quite informative, and I tell you, now I think we all know how to go and choose an excellent steak.
I hope so. Thank
And you can come to Lobel's, and Stanley will show you personally, too, how to do it. The most important tool in your own kitchen or in a butcher shop is a sharp knife. Evan Lobel is going to show us how he sharpens his knives.
I certainly will. First, you need a nice steel and a nice knife. down at a 45-degree angle. And this is the way we do it in the store. Very difficult to do it at home.
Pretty fancy.
It is. If you're at home, which you probably will be, just take it at a 45-degree angle and go on each side, and there you have it, a sharp knife.
Oh boy, sharp knife, snack time!
Stanley!
Snack time, what do we have here?
What did you make
We
for
have
us?
rack of lamb, filet mignon, sharp knives. You don't even need it, this is Lobel's meat, so you don't need sharp knives. Look at that. Be my guest.
Sharp knives. They're a good thing.
It's good.
I'm going to say something that in the restaurant world is a little bit dangerous to say, but I think that Frank Delattrain's steaks are amongst the best I've ever tasted. And I thought it would be really fun to have him here in my kitchen showing all of us how he really cooks steak at Patroon Restaurant in New York City. So what do you do, and how do you get this steak, and why does it taste so good?
Okay, so first of all, we take a cut of meat, which is a porterhouse steak, which has on the side one filet mignon, and on the other side is a shell steak. In order to call a porterhouse, it has to have the filet. If it doesn't have the filet, it's called a T-bone. At the restaurant, we marinate this overnight.
In what?
We have a little rosemary, some rosemary sprigs. We just put them in the pan. Sliced garlic, finely sliced garlic, the thinner the better. Just like this. And I add a little olive oil. And we're just going to place the steak right over it on top of it.
So no salt, no pepper.
Not salt yet. Pepper, yes. The reason why I didn't put any salt is the salt will draw all the water, all the blood out of the meat.
If you were doing this at home, 24 hours in the refrigerator.
12 to 24 overnight,
Okay.
it will be good enough. And take a skillet pan, cast iron skillet pan. The heat is very even in this pan. You can regulate the flame as low as you want, and you won't burn it. We add a couple of tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 1 tablespoon of butter, and we let it slowly melt. You don't want to get it too hot because it's a thick piece of meat. You want to cook it nice and easy. We take the porterhouse steak with the garlic and we put it in the pan. Very slowly, gently, so the garlic doesn't burn it. And now we just sear the steak on both sides for about, I would say about 2-3 minutes on each side.
So a little bit of garlic here. You want
There's a little bit of garlic left. We're going to add it to it with a couple of spoons of rosemary. We flavor the butter.
Notice he's putting a little bit of salt on the uncooked side. Okay, it's just getting ready. Okay. While the steak is searing on both sides, what should we do?
What we'll do now is we make a compound butter with 2 tablespoons of butter. We'll have like a teaspoon of soy sauce. We have 1 whole shallot peeled and diced, very fine, a clove of garlic, and a half jalapeno pepper, about a teaspoon of chopped rosemary. And we use this butter to finish the sauce. Now this will go in the oven, and we'll turn it every 7 to 10 minutes. There we go.
So I'm sharpening the knife, getting ready to slice Frank's steak. It's been in 375?
275 degrees for like 25 minutes.
Okay, so let's see how you know if it's done.
Okay.
Oh, it looks great. What's the touch that you want?
This is a medium rare steak. The doneness of the meat, you can test, there's a little trick right on the palm of your hand. This part of your hand feels like the steak is medium rare. This part of your hand feels like it's medium.
Yours is softer than mine. Feel mine. Her feels hard.
Yeah, you're medium.
I'm medium.
And this is more like well done, medium well to well done.
Oh, okay.
Depends on your part of your hand. This is a medium rare. This is a good medium rare. Now what we'll have to do is we'll have to let it rest to stabilize all the juices in the meat. If you cut a piece of meat that's hot, all the blood will run out and you lose all the flavor from it.
So now how long do you let it rest?
For about 5 to 7 minutes. We can do meanwhile on a low flame to remove the garlic and the rosemary. You don't want to burn them. We can deglaze the pan with a little bit of red wine. This is a Pinot Noir from Oregon. So we put about, I would say, half a cup of wine and deglaze the pan slowly. We let it reduce a little. This will give a little acidity to the meat. And then we add the compound butter. And you don't want to really cook it, you just want to bind the sauce with it. And this will go right over the sliced steak.
It smells good.
Meat is ready to be carved. You don't want to poke the meat.
No.
Now, the meat has rested long enough so there are no juices coming out. All the juices are still inside. And we slice the filet, 4 slices, which we can place in the platter. Then we have the sirloin steak, which has to be sliced against the grain, otherwise it's tough.
It's cutting like soft butter.
It is. It's absolutely. And this is prime meat. That's because it's prime meat. Now the meat is in the platter, ready to go. The pain juices are warm. We put the oil juice on the steak, just like so.
Well, I don't know if your mouth is watering, but mine certainly is. The perfect porterhouse steak, a la Patroon and Frank Delatrain. Thank you so much. This has been fun to cook with you, and we have certainly learned a lot.
Hope to see you at Patron soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Several hundred flowers.